6:30, and Mr. Gonzalez, you're acting as chair tonight
Okay,
in Dan's absence.
all right.
You ready to go?
Yep, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Perfect.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, have roll call, please.
Sure, I'll do planning commissioners first. Richardson?
Here.
Edley? Here. Walters? Present. Gonzalez?
Here.
And it's noted that Ferguson, Blossom, and Leonard are absent and excused. Board members, Cook?
Here.
Escorte?
Here.
M. Corte?
Here.
Lyle?
Here.
Bartlett? Yes. Brent?
Here.
I'm here too.
Oh, Walters, sorry. I didn't catch, I caught you on the first one, right?
Yeah. She's scheduled for both.
Yeah, you were on the top.
She's answering for choice. Right. Okay, review for any conflict of interest. Seeing none. Approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for the Planning Commission and Board of Trustees meeting on Tuesday, February 7th, 2020.
Support.
And then support from the Planning Commission.
Support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Approval of the Planning Commission regular minutes of January 3rd, 2022. 2023, that should be.
Oops. Thank you. Hopefully the minutes are correct.
Yeah.
Is there any corrections, or you want me to make a motion? I'll make a motion to approve the Planning Commission regular meeting minutes of January 3rd, 2023.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Public comment. Starting at 6:35. Seeing none, we'll close it at 6:35. Correspondence. We got one letter.
There was also, just the only other item is that it's in your packet, Acme Township is beginning their master plan update, so we'll probably take a look at that once the draft is out to look at consistency.
Great, thank you. Okay. None other? Okay, reports from the Township Board.
Is this, well, this is traditionally the Planning Commission meeting, so if you would like to.
The supervisor's here.
Well, I tell you what, I will just let you know what's coming up next Monday. We have quite a full agenda, so everybody take a look at your packet because it's 200 pages of full of content. There's only a couple reports in there that take up some space. But the action items will have a public hearing on a Holiday Woods Special Assessment District that was introduced last month. There will be some things on there, East Bay Ambulance, really some pretty good news things because we had a couple grants awarded through the 2% tribal funds, and we'll be going over short-term rentals. Claire will be here and PT will be here as well, and we'll have council here too. Site condominium, Holiday Forest 2, and, a bottom lane conveyance, and then National Flood Insurance Program, which I know everybody's on the edge of their seat waiting to see if that ordinance gets introduced and subsequently passed. But those are some of the, flood insurance is one of those housekeeping things that we got to get done because you want it done. So that's what's coming up next week on the Township Board's agenda.
Great, thank you. For the ZBA, I can report that on the January 10th meeting, we reaffirmed our December 14th decision about TC Water Sports not being an accessory use to the hotel. So that's what we did on the 10th. Claire?
Okay. Good evening. Just a few quick updates from Planning and Zoning Department. So we've got the final adopted master plan is on the website, and we're planning to print copies for all the boards and commissions. If for some reason you prefer to just use it online, let me know. But otherwise, we'll plan to print copies for you. Wanted to just mention that Beckett Rader contacted us about hosting a regional planning and zoning training. So it's something that they're looking to put on. They've been in communication with some other communities that are interested in offering the training to their boards and commissions, and they thought that East Bay Township has a nice venue, and so we're going to be working with them to schedule and host that training. And we'll let you know as soon as we have more details. Wanted to mention that CEDAM, the Community Development Fellow that East Bay Township's going to be hosting, the position is open and it's live, it's posted on the website. So we'd love if you could share the position with any networks. With your networks, there's no minimum qualifications for the position. It's just someone who is enthusiastic about, local government and community and economic development. So we're excited to host that fellow. Wanted to mention that on February 21st, we are going to be hosting a public workshop on riparian zoning protections, and that's something that's come out of the zoning ordinance update process. And so Joe Tingary here with Giffords Webster is going to talk a little bit more about that process, but just wanted to get that date on your calendar. It's the third Tuesday, so I know the Planning Commission normally has that date available, but we'd love as much participation from our boards and commissions at that. And just wanted to mention to the Planning Commission, looks like we've got 3 public hearings for next week, as well as looking at a potential ordinance amendment, so it'll be a busy March, so.
Great. Okay, business before the board. First, the zoning ordinance rewrite. Claire, you want to take that?
Sure. So we've got Joe Tingary here with Giffords Webster, and he's going to do the majority of the presentation. This is really, we wanted to take this opportunity just to provide an update to the board as well as the Planning Commission on where we are in the process with the zoning ordinance update. We're 3 months into an 11-month process. We've been meeting with the subcommittee every other week, so bi-weekly. And so this process is set up with feedback loops. So the subcommittee reviews content. All content will be filtered through the Planning Commission at bi-monthly meetings, and the Planning Commission will be working with Giffords Webster, which will eventually be, recommended onto the Township Board. But just early in the process, we wanted to take the opportunity to just update the Township Board on where we are in the process with the ordinance update. And with that, I'll turn it over to Joe, and I saw him a second ago.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. My colleague Andy Mott is also here on the line with me. He's been working on this hand in hand with me the whole way, so I wanted him to be here as well. So we began this project really back in September. We weren't working on amendments at the time. We started out by polling officials and the public in a survey about what they'd like to see come out of this zoning ordinance amendment project. And the results of that survey are, of course, informing the way we approach the rewrite. The zoning audit was the other major thing that we were working on in the first couple months of our contract. So that was delivered in November, and it takes a deep look at the content of the zoning ordinance through a lens of, what we know to be best practices, local input from that survey and from your staff, and just general issues of readability, clarity, things like that. We look at all of that. And we also analyze your master plan to see what zoning changes it might call for or imply, and that informs our process of rewriting the zoning ordinance as well. So the steering committee began to meet in November. We had an introductory meeting in mid-November, and then really hit the ground in December. And the steering committee is now actively working through policy questions to provide some direction for the development of language. We started out with administrative content and development procedures. So we looked at the Zoning Board of Appeals, we looked at our processes for amendments and rezonings. We're still working on our nonconformity regulations. And then we talked about our policies towards site plan, special land use, public hearings, and PUD procedures. And, what might qualify for admin review, for instance. And we are using that guidance to inform the language redevelopment on all of that. Some of it is pretty well developed at this point. We've also worked kind of in the background on identifying where all the content will slot into the new zoning ordinance structure. We anticipate that a lot of language is going to be developed over the next couple of months to get us closer to a full draft, and we're going to have probably a couple of months where we're really working out how all of our districts work after we get through some of that. We're also going to be in town on the 21st to attend and present at that public workshop that Claire mentioned, primarily concerning your environmental overlays, Borden River, the Lakes District, and such. Getting that right is going to be really important in the new zoning ordinance, so we want to be as involved in the feedback process on that as possible. And when this process is over, you will have a completely new zoning ordinance in a much more user-friendly format, and all the language should be representative of what you called for in your master plan. And some of the cleanup that's just necessary when a zoning ordinance gets a little long in the tooth. And we're really excited about developing this document. We think the steering committee process is working really well so far. They've been a great group to work with, really engaged and truly reading through everything we sent and giving it due consideration. We've really appreciated the time and effort that they've put into it. And we think we're going to come out with a really, really good product at the end. And I don't really have a whole lot more to say in summary. That's really where we are in the process right now. We've got some months of drafting and discussion left to go. But we're in full swing, and it's exciting. It's been a good project so far.
Questions of Joe? Yes, ma'am.
So the meeting on the 21st, are you going to have a presentation, or is it going to be more like boards that people can walk around and look at? How is that format going to be?
We will be one of several presenters at that meeting. So Claire, I don't know if you want to fill people in on the other folks who are presenting, but we're going to be doing giving some information about how the zoning ordinance fits into this larger discussion about environmental preservation, natural resource, and riparian areas in your township. But we're going to be one of the presenters, and then there's going to be some breakout discussions that are going to come back to some final recommendations. Claire, did you want to elaborate on who else is going to be speaking?
Sure. Yeah, we just met with a group of residents, some representatives from the lakes, as well as Eagle, Soil Erosion, Watershed Center, kind of a advisory group to help us structure the meeting yesterday. And what came out of that, we're going to start out with some presentations. The Watershed Center is going to kind of give a bigger picture overview of the riparian zone, kind of the reason for the protections. And then we're going to have the agencies, soil erosion, as well as state, DNR, and Eagle, provide kind of a regulatory framework of what they regulate within the riparian zone. And then we're going to have Giffords-Webster go over East Bay Township's existing zoning regulations related to the 3 districts that are the Boardman River natural area and the lakes area, as well as the 2 environmental overlay districts that we have. And then we have some breakout questions that are kind of big picture, trying to have attendees kind of talk through what's working well, what are some opportunities for improvement, and what are some of the recommendations that they have for solutions. And we'll come back and report back in a larger format and kind of have a process where we're voting to prioritize the highest priorities. So it'll be interactive and kind of large group presentation as well as breakout.
And Claire, the group you mentioned that you met with that helped shape kind of the structure or format of that meeting, that included Wade Trim, our engineer.
Yes.
It included the county health department, the conservation district, to name a few. And you mentioned some lake area residents, but very specifically, they were Lake Association members or board members.
So stay tuned for some communications to help us to get the word out. One thing we discussed at the meeting yesterday was just how to get the word out. So each of the lake associations are going to communicate. We're looking to communicate with contractors, tree trimming companies, landscaping companies, builders, and just trying to really cast a wide net for attendees at the meeting.
Is there a plan for addressing that same kind of format with any other districts throughout this process?
At this time, not the public workshop format. Yeah.
I just want to add that in the in the sessions that the subcommittee has had, they've also had a lot of participation from the public with East Bay. So they've been here and they've made their comments known on the proceedings that we've had, and it's been very helpful. So.
That's a good question, though, Matt. I had the same question, too, because the process we're going through is very broad, right? There's a whole bunch of districts and a whole bunch of people that it impacts. And I know with the master plan, we did break that out into some different section. We did the focus groups for some different groups. But I think this one from the beginning of engaging Giffords-Webster, when we added the additional amount for public engagement, we were specifically looking towards that lakes overlay, because the Forest Lakes overlay has some things that make it more challenging administratively for planning and zoning. So we wanted to take a good focus at what's the goal of it and what would meet the goals of it. And there are the other segments that you would think to maybe to reach out to. I think we've tried to do a good job in reaching out to people and just making them aware of the zoning ordinance. And definitely we did during the master plan. And Claire, you continue to update that master plan list as well, too.
Thanks.
Yeah, I could see one subgroup as the business group, the business area. That would be something that I could see them bring together. And for that matter, as you get thinking about this, if there was any way of just bringing together some of the developers to hear what their comments are with respect to the overall workings of the ordinance as well as the interpretation of them, if that's possible.
Yeah, we haven't taken that step to do something like this meeting with those groups, but we have did reach out specifically to developers and businesses with the audit. And so their information is included in the audit that Giffords-Webster did.
Yeah, maybe an opportunity to circle back.
Another follow-up, yeah.
Yeah.
I can think of a couple of people that would be helpful. Questions, comments?
So the deliverable, obviously, out of this whole effort is a rewritten zoning ordinance, right? Completely updated, consolidated, it's a lot easier to follow. Is there also going to be a deliverable from Giffords of maybe what a recommended best practice is for maintenance of that, updating it, in the future? How we're going to kind of keep some consistency, so.
But I'll let Joe speak to that, and I can.
Right. So there are two things that come along with your new zoning ordinance, one of which is what you were just referring to. We can provide some guidance on future amendments. And then the other thing is there will be a follow-up project that is a development review guide. That's a book that is available to the public that includes all of your fillable forms and things and some flow charts of the development process and basic guidance for people who aren't used to the development process to help them get through it a little more smoothly with fewer surprises. So yeah, that all comes at the back end of the project.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, part of the reason that we went with Giffords Webster is just that they do that ongoing support for the township. So in addition to helping advise on some of the content, they will format all of our future zoning ordinance amendments into this clear zoning format. So I think it's going to just ensure that our ordinance stays very up-to-date and usable and consistent, and there's no, discrepancies as we continue to update and amend the ordinance.
We always talk about since Claire started, there's just been this running hit list of things that need to be addressed. And we kind of joke, but in all sincerity, it's true. We'll deal with all of those things and more through this long process. But when it's over and the deliverable is finally done into the township board, through all of those steps, as soon as it's implemented, Claire will start a new list. And it'll be from the workings of working with that zoning ordinance.
You can see that in the master plan. I mean, when we started the master plan, we were talking about purchasing the property behind on Holiday. Well, by the time we finished it, we'd already owned it. So
So you're saying they moved too quick on Holiday, or?
that's not
moved
what
too
I
slow
said
on
at
the
all.
Okay, any other comments, thoughts, questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Okay, moving on to the brownfield planning, we're going to have Ann Jamison who'll be making a presentation.
Hi, everybody. I just need Claire's help. One minute seated.
Okay.
For board members, Ann was the one who was very instrumental in helping obtain the funding for the PFAS families, for the 19 families where we were able to help rectify that situation. So it was very much appreciated.
That was actually really good thing to look at, a really good project, yeah. So if she connects the computer and the PowerPoint, hopefully everything's in order.
Yeah, we're good. I'm just gonna secure this.
Okay, cool. So, hi guys. My name is Ann Jamison.
Sorry, you can start talking. I'm just gonna.
I work for the Grand Traverse County's Brownfield Redevelopment Authority as their basically director of that program. So I've been working with the county now for about 5 years, but I've been working in this community, Grand Traverse County, for over probably 25 years. Background, like from my background in general is I started out in environmental consulting. I know a few people in the room who also have done that as well and still do. And started getting involved in brownfield redevelopment and economic development in the later 90s when we had some of these programs come online that were adopted by the state of Michigan. And so it's been a pretty fascinating trip. It's, basically looking at really creative ways to work with communities, developers, coming up with common goals, common interests, for productive redevelopment of these basically sites that are considered brownfields. So today I'm just going to give you guys an overview of Brownfield 101 a little bit. So I know some of you are really familiar with that, but I'm also going to go into how we can use Act 381, which is a Brownfield Financing Act, to our advantage in communities that don't often benefit from this full suite of opportunities that some of the core communities do. And how do we do that, and how do we work around these projects? So I will start from there. And then please ask questions. No problem if you want me to stop. I'm happy to stop and answer questions. Do you want to do it like that?
That's fine, but would you define core communities for everybody and everyone listening?
Yeah, so under Act 381, the original act was basically only adopted for environmental cleanup. That was in 1996. About in 2000, they amended Act 381 to include what we call non-environmental activities. Non-environmental activities include site preparation and public infrastructure improvements. They only allowed those site preparation and public infrastructure improvements to be allowed in what we call core communities. Core communities were basically, it's kind of a long story, but core communities came from another act, which was Public Act 146, which is the Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act. And that was primarily focused on redevelopment of functionally obsolete properties. And so basically, the state borrowed from one act to another, like they do oftentimes. And so what a core community is basically a list of about 60 communities, and don't quote me on that, but it's under 200 communities in Michigan that were designated as core communities. And those communities are places like Detroit, Flint, Traverse City, the main larger communities that do have a history of industry and development. So over the years, we've been all working on how do we, level this playing field between a core and non-core. And I'll go into that, Beth, on the specifics on what can be used in either community. And how do we, work around some of the challenges that, non-core communities like East Bay Township has when it comes to looking at redeveloping sites or wanting to do public infrastructure improvements. This is kind of a great example of this opportunity. So, again, with Grand Traverse County, we really try to work with all of our communities in building opportunities for sustainable development. That's one of our main goals. Doesn't want to go. Oh, there we go. So what is a brownfield? Those of you who are not familiar with brownfields, brownfields are previously developed sites typically that have barriers to redevelopment, either through the presence or threat of contamination, that local gas station that's been sitting there forever and nobody's developed it. Well, there's probably a reason, because there's probably contamination on it, and that's problematic and costly to take on that cleanup efforts. There's also, as I was talking about before, functional obsolescence. Functional obsolescence comes into play when you have a building that's been sitting there for a number of years. It can't be used for the intended purposes that it was originally constructed for. A good example is Garfield Township, the Kmart redevelopment that's happening right now. That was, Cherryland Mall. It's really been blighted and somewhat functionally obsolete. That recently has just been redeveloped into a different use from a, big box or small box. So again, using those tools to look at opportunities to redevelop something into a new opportunity that wouldn't, have previously come about or could be afforded under normal conditions. So the third is a blighted conditions. Blight is defined, there's basically a laundry list of how you define blight, but it can be anything from a public nuisance, disconnected, permanently from utilities, a number of other options too, tax reversion, and owned or controlled by a land bank tract authority. And then there's the fourth option, which is a historic resource. Most of you are familiar with the village at the Commons. I like to use that as sort of a catch-all. It qualifies for all four of those items. So brownfields allow us to reimburse for what we call eligible activities. Those eligible activities get reimbursed through tax increment financing within core and non-core communities. The difference between the two is in non-core communities like East Bay Township and most of our townships and villages in the county, the only eligible cost for reimbursement through the tax increment financing is environmental and cleanup and demolition. In core communities like the city of Traverse City, they have an expanded definition of what they can use tax increment revenues to reimburse for, which also includes the environmental demolition, site preparation, and public infrastructure improvements. Our program goals as a county and working with our communities is really looking at the importance of redevelopment in your communities. Brownfield redevelopment, it really reduces sprawl. It reduces public health threats by cleaning up environmental contamination. It encourages new investment on vacant and blighted properties within your community. This also allows for looking at infrastructure improvements and how that can either support new developments and or recreational opportunities. We like to get very creative in Grand Traverse County, especially with our recreation. A great example of that is the Boardman Lake Loop. That was a really big public-private partnership, where we leveraged tax dollars off an existing redevelopment that was basically put in place on the north end of the lake, all those condos that went in. That was part of a brownfield plan that was originally adopted in 2002. And written by me.
And written by Ms. Walters, and then amended by Ms. Jameson in 2011, right? And basically, that's funny. And then essentially what that did was, we were able to implement, really amazing recreational trails around the Boardman Lake to provide for connectivity between the city of Traverse City, Garfield Township, and we were able to leverage the ability to do public infrastructure into Garfield Township by putting in easement agreements. So there's, again, using the tools that you have in the toolbox, there's different methodologies to be able to achieve commonality between jurisdictions. Basically, today's presentation is really looking at how Grand Traverse County can partner in further assisting with facilitation of new recreational infrastructure and infrastructure in general opportunities in East Bay Township that promote economic vitality within your community. Really, how do we come up with overcoming those challenges and qualifying infrastructure as an eligible activity within your community? So the project that we've been all talking about and working on over the last, goodness, almost a year now, is the proposed development, the Hyatt House.
what had basically culminated was the county was approached by the development team, and their interest in creating more of a walkable community from their development to the DNR park, the TART trail system, and then getting better pedestrian access to the beach across the street for their, of course, for their, folks who are staying there. But, we looked upon it as an opportunity to really collaborate and make this a bigger opportunity for East Bay Township, the, folks who work with TART, and really started engaging with discussions with the MDNR. So the idea was to partner with the Grand Traverse County Land Bank to provide additional opportunities to be able to leverage the new taxes that are coming in off of that new development. Right now, it's been vacant for, how many years? 20, it's been, not a whole lot's been happening there. So we started talking and coming up with some creative solutions to be able to use the tax increment financing tool from this private development to assist with some of these public infrastructure improvements that East Bay Township has interest in doing, the DNR has interest in doing, to really create a public-private partnership.
When Ann mentions collaboration, it's with a capital C with this, because we're talking, it's not only the Grand Traverse County, Brownfield, the DNR, which she mentioned, the township, also MDOT and Beta. We've drawn in the road commission. We've sought input from TART, as you mentioned, and the Conservancy. So it's like I said, capital C with the collaboration, and a lot of people very, very interested in what this project may potentially yield as things progress.
Right, yeah, with these larger projects and development opportunities, the more folks that we can bring in and collaborate with, because there are so many moving parts, it's really important to sit down and have those discussions up front to basically make sure that everybody's comfortable with what the approach is that we're taking and sort of this intent of this discussion tonight, so that you can have the opportunity to ask questions, because while Grand Traverse County has a Brownfield Authority, you as a local unit of government are the drivers of what you want for your community. We're here just to help facilitate that vision. And I can't, say that enough, that, most of us who run county authorities really look to our local units of government to drive the direction on the planning and the visioning, and really couldn't do it without you guys, like with Beth and Claire. It's been instrumental to everything, so it's been really a positive experience.
And these are preliminary discussions that we've been having, and at this point in that process, like you showed at the Boardman, all of these different projects take different time periods, right? So the Boardman took over 20 years, right? This one could take a while, could be much shorter. But at this point, we really wanted to start to get the information to the township boards and commissions.
Right, and it's really setting that stage, and the key is really all about our tax increment financing. So those of you who are familiar with tax increment financing, kind of raise your hand. Okay, so most of you have a decent idea of how it works. So essentially, it's not a creation of new taxes. It is not a district, like a DDA district or other TIFA districts, the older TIFA districts. What it is under the Brownfield Financing Act is a site-specific eligible property TIF. So the property, currently has, I think, a basically taxable value of $600,000, which is really low in terms of what we normally see when we first come into putting in a brownfield plan. A brownfield plan locks in that base value. So any increase in property taxes that occur as a result of that development doesn't impact anybody else around us, doesn't increase your neighbor's property taxes, doesn't increase, the property taxes next door. It's only based on the assessment for the new, once the new development occurs. It's that increase that the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority and the Land Bank can capture to promote these redevelopment and reimbursement of these redevelopment activities.
And it is taxes, not assessments.
It is taxes, not assessments.
That's right.
Yeah, it's based on new property taxes that are generated based on that new development that comes in. So that's why we like to get ahead of these plans and start talking about how can we leverage that future tax revenue to work towards benefits for the community.
I have a question on that. Go ahead.
On recapture of the tax, does all of the entities that's on that tax notice have to agree to that?
So that's a great question. So under the Brownfield Financing Act, we have to notice all the taxing jurisdictions that the Brownfield plan will impact the future tax revenue.
Right,
They still get the base tax revenues. So this base tax that they're currently getting, they'll get that until the eligible activities are reimbursed. They still, continue getting that base. It's only the increment that they capture. There is no opt-out provision under the Brownfield Financing Act. The only opt-out is we cannot capture debt mills, we cannot capture special assessments. So those are the two types of millages that we're not allowed to touch.
And,
Mike?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So my question then is, who does the assessment of the property? Is that done in conjunction with the Brownfield and the local township?
So the Brownfield Authority has no involvement in assessing property taxes. It is all done through your assessing department.
Okay, so the local community still does the assessment, and then you get the additional incremental increase.
That's correct. So it's really only, we work in collaboration with the assessors, the treasurers, to make sure that things are being properly transferred and captured and reimbursed, so.
So you do have some input then?
Not on the assessment,
Not on the assessment.
but just validating, right, the procedures.
Okay.
So when they calculate, like, for example, how much can go back to them and how much was there to be captured, they validate that information.
Right. And so that runs all through our county treasurer, Heidi Sheppy. So Heidi essentially works in collaboration with me. She basically works with the local units of government. If it's in a brownfield plan, they're paying their taxes, right? Those taxes, the incremental increase in those property taxes, they pay those. Then the treasurer from each local community will take a portion of those taxes that are eligible for capture and then transfer those over to the county's Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, which is all validated through our treasurer, county treasurer. We also get audited. So this is a very on the up and up process. We get audited by the state, the county gets audited. We have reporting requirements every year. We have to report to the state. We have to enter all of our tax capture from all of our projects. And then that's cross-checked at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And so if they see anything out of sorts, they'll flag it, and then we have to work with them on
Mindy?
validation.
The other thing is that this is only reimbursement, right? So they have to have receipts, they have to have documentation of that money has been spent on that project for it to be reimbursed for anything. So
Right.
so if they capture more than there's eligible activities, they can hold it if eligible activities are coming. But it's not, if those eligible activities never come, then it does go back to the.
It does return to the taxing jurisdictions, exactly. So we only reimburse the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority for eligible expenses that were incurred as part of the Brownfield plan that was approved by your community, so East Bay Township, you're the first stop. So we first, have you approve the local brownfield plan with a local concurrence and recommendation that you would take it to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, the county. The county Brownfield Redevelopment Authority then vets it and approves it, and then it goes to the County Board of Commissioners. So it's basically a three-step process for approval. If we're going for state tax revenue, which is school operating and SET, state education tax, that has to be vetted through either EGLE, which is the environmental regulatory agency, or the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. You know, Dan. And they are the entity that approves the non-environmental piece. So, yeah.
And the type of infrastructure improvements, I mean, there are many, but specific when you're looking at the building that Ann just showed, we're looking at walkability, how to improve the safety of walkability, how to improve the safety of beta stops, trails to integrate that 31 with the TART trail, all of those different types of infrastructure.
And since East Bay Township doesn't have a corridor improvement authority or a DDA or an old-style TIFA district, this is a really good mechanism to be able to piggyback on new development coming into your communities to basically provide future opportunities for your community to do these types of infrastructure projects that is long-term beneficial for economic development, for growth, for your community, for your, folks who live here, but also attracting people, to live, work, and play. So this is just kind of another model on how once the project is, fully reimbursed, the local Brownfield Revolving Fund captures a portion of those taxes. That's not negotiable, but typically what we do is we used our local Brownfield Revolving Fund to help with the PFAS contamination. So we have some revenue in our local Brownfield Fund that we usually grant it to either communities in need of, gap financing for environmental cleanup. A lot of the work we also grant out is to nonprofits for housing projects where they've acquired a piece of land, they want to do like a low-income housing project, or they want to do a workforce housing deal, but they have a gap in their financing. We can provide some of the local Brownfield revolving funds to them for specific eligible cost, such as their environmental due diligence, their phase 1s, 2s, BEAs, sometimes cleanup activities, engineering controls in the environmental realm, demolition and site preparation in public infrastructure in certain cases.
And what Dan Leonard mentioned last week at the MTA chapter was a lot of the eligible expenses are really those expenses that developers cannot finance. The banks aren't willing to finance that portion of it, so there's no way for them to get to that. So this offers that tool.
Exactly. So if you we do a lot of pro forma modeling, which pro forma is like a development and operating tool that we use in the industry to basically model what is the viability of this project without these gap financing tools. MEDC, love them. They are the master of, just basically making sure checks and balances and making sure that, there is an actual gap. It's not a money grab. There's a need in this project. Without it, but for these incentives, the project wouldn't be feasible. So we really try to look at that too with the county, especially in particular when we're looking at the gap financing when it comes to some of the non-environmental activities.
How long did the TIF go on, per se? Is it a set amount, or is it based on the amount of money that was the brownfield had put into the project?
Actually, that's another good question. So it really depends on the local unit of government and how long we tend to put together a brownfield plan for. So under Act 381, we are allowed to capture revenue up to 30 years. That is all variable on the amount of cost, right? So say you have a project that's only a $500,000 cleanup. But the increment's going to be large enough that you pay that off in 10 years. Then the brownfield's done in 10 years, right? But if you have a project that's, $10 million and they're only generating maybe $500,000 a year, it's going to take double that time. So it really is site-specific, project-dependent, eligible activity-based, and sometimes I've actually been seeing this more and more, is sometimes communities will put like milestones in, like, okay, has this occurred for this project? Are we still anticipating doing that public infrastructure improvement? Where are we in 10 years, right? Kind of do a reevaluation of it. Brownfield plans are living documents. Essentially, they can be amended, they can be added onto, but our maximum years of capture is 30, and then it's terminated. There's no amending past that 30-year period.
What if you don't capture all the money?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, you're done?
Doesn't matter, you're done. Yeah, there's no provision under the act to allow for an extension. So, yeah, the cap is 30 years. So essentially, going into, how are we going to qualify this property in particular as an eligible property to be able to allow for the eligibility of core community infrastructure improvements to occur. And there's a tool out there that basically in the act allows for if a property is designated as blighted because it's owned or under the control of a land bank, whether or not it's located in a qualified local unit of government, which is a core community, the act allows us to then qualify that property as an eligible property to have additional eligible cost and eligible activities that include infrastructure and site preparation. So we have been collaborating with the Grand Traverse County Land Bank. We've done a number of deals with them. Blair Township, I don't know if you're familiar with the Blaines out there, and the H&M, and now I think there's a new residential development going out there. But that was a land bank property, and because it was land banked, we were able to leverage tax revenue for eligible activities for the infrastructure improvements, which included, the road commission got involved, so they chipped in a little bit. Blair Township also contributed dollars towards the project, and then, of course, private development did a lot of the infrastructure as well. But that was a good opportunity on how land banks in that case, was very effective to be able to provide an opportunity for redevelopment for that community.
So you have to really forget what the term blighted means to you on an average term, right?
Right, so because, I'm happy to share, sort of the section of the act that has 10 different definitions of blight, but it does. So there's tax reversion, but also, the ability, if it's owned or under the control of the land bank, is one of the options that it's provided for. So Grand Traverse County established their land bank in 2006. It's been instrumental in supporting over a dozen projects in East Bay Township and surrounding communities, with a focus on providing economic development opportunities in partnership most often with the Grand Traverse County BRA. We like to work together because there's a lot of options that we can collaborate on. Eligible costs or eligible activities that the land bank can't do, the brownfield can do. Eligible activities that the land bank can do, the brownfield often can't do. So it's a really great opportunity to have that intergovernmental collaboration. So currently, public infrastructure improvements are in Grand Traverse County, as I've said, I think about 100 times now, only are in basically eligible community is the city of Traverse City. and not within East Bay Township or any other community in our county. In order to expand the opportunities for East Bay Township to include the site preparation and public infrastructure, the Grand Traverse County Land Bank is going to acquire this piece of property.
Who owns it right now?
It is owned by an LLC.
Is it the Hyatt House, Hyatt House LLC?
It's not a high, it's like a holding,
But
company.
it's sold
Like
from,
hospitality.
it's hospitality, TC Hospitality, right? LLC, yeah. So then it will basically transfer temporarily to the land bank. We have had these discussions with the land bank on how this will look. We have agreements in place that have to yet be approved, but we have some draft contracts. That it's a temporary transfer of land during the period in where the brownfield plan will be adopted, because it has to be under the control of the land bank during the brownfield plan's adoption period. It then can revert back to the property owner, and that be transferred back to the new entity who's doing the development for the Hyatt House, and then it's already been adopted in the brownfield plan. All the eligible activities still stay in play.
you didn't find a facility condition out there, right?
No, no facility.
Question for you. Is the land bank a taxable entity?
No, it's a, quasi-governmental agency
So
similar
if,
to.
if the property is transferred to the land bank, where's your tax recapture?
So it's only temporarily.
But after 30 years?
No, so the land bank only has to own it for like 3 months. So the land bank is going to own it for 3-4 months, and then it'll be transferred back to the property owner in order to qualify the property for these eligible activities. Mindy?
So is the assessed value going to zero then?
That's a good question. When he said that, I went, So I think the attorneys are negotiating that won't happen, because we don't want you to lose your base.
That's what I remember as well,
Value.
from just listening to them on some of the Zoom calls when the attorney and Chris Forsyth were kind of chatting. That
Yeah.
is what I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah. So typically, it would revert to zero, but you can there's these loop ways, so you're not affected. And we can make sure we go over that in clear detail when we get there.
And the land bank is a board, and you would recognize, if you went to their meetings, many of the people on that. Heidi Sheppy, I believe she's the chair on there. Jim Baker is on there. I believe, is the clerk on there?
I don't think she sits, but she attends.
Okay, and Dean Bott is on there.
Yes, yeah, the financial, yeah.
Yeah.
Matt, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a few questions. I know I was going to let you get through your presentation, and maybe you could answer some of them, or I can ask.
You can ask right now if you want. Yeah.
Kind of along those lines, but I guess it sounds like a lot of government agencies involved, including primarily yours, facilitating this process. What are the administrative costs?
Oh, that's a great question. So the admin fees, basically, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority doesn't charge our local communities any administrative fees. Under our current brownfield plans, we capture administrative fees to basically operate our brownfield authority. So that's part of the authority's capture, includes admin. So,
Is there like a rough order of magnitude on a percentage of what that would be?
for your project specific, or do you mean like generally, how much does
Any
it
project. I
count?
mean, a lot of this stuff it sounds very flexible, and these custom plans that you can tailor towards specific.
So are you asking how much per plan do we capture in admin fees?
Yeah, over the term.
Okay, so basically it's a yearly capture and we're capped. So we're capped on how much we capture over, I think we have 25 plans right now in the county. So I think the max is what, 150, 175?
That seems high.
That seems high, maybe 100,000. I'm going to have to look, but under the legislation, every brownfield authority is capped on how many plans they administer, right? So if we have 25 plans in the county, we can only capture up to a certain amount of property taxes across all of those projects. And what we do is proportional capture based on what revenue is being generated on the plan. But it typically doesn't exceed 5% per plan. About the average.
My other question is, I know we're talking in generalities, your presentation is in generalities explaining what this is, but also we're talking about a specific project here. So can you define for this specific project, what defines qualifying activity?
So the qualifying activity that we are anticipating putting what will be included in the brownfield plan for the Hyatt House will be all of the public infrastructure improvements that I'm going to go into here in a minute.
Okay.
And then the site development itself will have some site prep activities, but not a whole lot because, they don't have contamination on the property, so there might be some grading, grubbing, land balancing, that type of thing, but.
But it's statute.
Right.
Statute says what can be an eligible activity.
There's a list, a template that you can, like an Excel spreadsheet that they have that goes down through them. One of the things that I thought was interesting in this project was, I think really the Hyatt House was the impetus and the driver. I'd love to say Ann or Claire or I had a light bulb go off and put all this together. That's not the case. The Hyatt House really, I think, charged with wanting to make their facility the best for the people who stay there. Also found the value in making it the best due to the walkability and the infrastructure around it. And so it's self-serving, but it's also the general community benefits as well.
And this developer has experience working in brownfield redevelopment. They've had other properties downstate where they've done redevelopments on brownfield sites. And so they were interested to see what, options would be available just to provide that more of that, walkability and community access and so forth.
So it sounds like maybe under the current conditions without the tax increment financing, they could probably pull off a development of a regular ABC hotel, but this is a fancier hotel that's going to cost a little bit more. And
There's a whole lot of
Well-
community benefits that can come with this if they expand it through the TIF.
And this really was more focused on the community benefits than it really was on the private development opportunities for them. Most of the projects we work on are really, really focused on, not most, I'll say the majority of the projects we all work on that are brownfield redevelopment is really about just that eligible property, just benefiting that eligible property either through cleanup or, other eligible activities that come into play. This is a great opportunity because it provides an opportunity for East Bay Township because we have this opportunity to get in when the taxes are really low, leverage those property taxes over a number of years to provide for some of these cool features that we've been looking at doing out here.
Think real quick, if I could, to Matt's question. This property, the Hyatt House property is a nice size, but it's not large to contain a lot as well. What's interesting too is the eligible infrastructure can be located off of the site. So that's important to remember too. And what's very interesting and beneficial to this project is the location of the state property just to the east that has an extensive amount of frontage along 31 and trails backed up to that property on the south side. So, and it's adjacent, so it would qualify public infrastructure there, as well as on the flip side too, which is incredibly close to that 3 Mile and 31 intersection.
Correct. So if you see this map example, it's not super, it was hard to blow up. But we can definitely give you guys the original documents where these came from. But this is sort of a visioning that I was able to get from Claire, who was working with TART Trails on what really, the focus area of, the project development could be inclusive of, in providing, these connectivity where the TART Trail now runs south behind the park, and it then cuts into the park at kind of a weird location that's not really friendly for pedestrians to access. And so the idea was to work with DNR on sort of re-looping that path, creating more, I guess,
Beneficial to the park, beneficial to the community.
so that it's not just like visitors who are coming in and, staying at the park camping, but it's also folks who live, just behind here. So the focus area really is that sort of dotted area, and will provide, not just the recreational trails, but we're also talking about big picture, and remember this, we're still doing a lot of visioning here, but, there has been talk about traffic calming along US 31, using different methodologies that Claire can explain better than I can. And, yeah,
Just add to one thing.
please.
So the map that Ann is pointing to is the Conservancy, and so they're really looking to connect Refit to the TART Trail, and then a safe crossing, having some entity take over that easement across the railroad to get people into the state park, having some sort of easement just at the edge of the state park to get people to the state park beach, which will ultimately, once we connect to Refit, will get us up to the 3-mile trail that's coming up through the Land Conservancy property up to Hammond Road. So I think it is a really cool opportunity to kind of, help make this, connect all of this beach district area to the regional asset that's our trail system that we're working on.
Right.
In the evaluation of what would qualify or not qualify, is there anything from a statute basis that says it has to be community development or community benefits? Because it seems that being able to have the Land Conservancy buy my property for 3 months qualify for funding for additional items that normally I wouldn't, and then flip back to me. I mean, there must be something that's a break on this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, because there has been discussions over the years as to how to use the land bank as a tool. In Grand Traverse County, we're trying to use the land bank in the most effective way to give opportunities for private and public, and create a balance between the two. We've talked with, our state representatives, and had discussions about using land banks as a tool. Multiple communities across the state are using this as an opportunity. A good example, in fact, I used one project in particular in Oakland County. They were working with the Michigan State Land Bank. Oakland County and Commerce Township, there was an old gravel pit that was wanting to get redeveloped for housing. And so they worked with the state land bank, because Oakland County did not have a land bank at the time. This is last year. They just formed their land bank. And essentially used the tool to be able to put in infrastructure, because everybody's out on wells out there. So everybody's on a well and or septic field. So by putting these new developments in and not having access to public infrastructure, sewer, water, et cetera, it puts a real burden on the environmental resources from a, watershed perspective. So, this kind of is similar and not similar, but it's basically creating opportunities where there haven't been.
So is there any effort in the legislature to equalize between the core and non-core? Because it sounds to me that there's a lot of creative solutions going on.
I heard there was I don't know if this is true or not, Ann, maybe you know. I heard when they created the list of core communities, there was a lot of arm wrestling going on in Lansing over, who would be on that list and who wouldn't be on that list.
favors and all that jazz. To my knowledge, and I do sit on collaborative stakeholder groups that we regularly meet with at the state with, Eagle, either with Eagle or MEDC, there has been no push to expand core communities. Yeah. So it's a real shame for our rural communities because it really does impact,
But it is nice that there have been some,
provisions put in
Yes.
place to allow for, the ability to create these opportunities.
I think that was one of the things, I don't know if it was you or Chris who mentioned it when we were at a meeting, and you mentioned you were just really excited to see us potentially take to the township the opportunity to use these tools when historically it's really just been the city. And so it's kind of nice to be able to see that opportunity with other communities.
I mean, Paul, for example, we have, we have we have three brownfield plans that overlap between the city of Traverse City and Garfield Township, right? Commons is one, the Boardman Lake Loop is one. There has been discussion on the Commons for years about doing a 425, which is an annexation of property to the city of Traverse City, which is a temporary annexation, right? You see where I'm going here? So there's also what we've used in Garfield Township to do infrastructure improvements, like the trail improvements around the Boardman Lake Loop, was we put in infrastructure, and we put in easement agreements just for that specific infrastructure, so that it could qualify as a core community, because the city of Traverse City put in these agreements and easement agreements along the Boardman within the jurisdiction of Garfield Township, but under the legislation, that's allowable, just like land banking is. So it's not a switch and bait. It's not, we're up to no good funny business. We're really just trying to work as creatively as we can with our communities to really provide a benefit where we see a benefit opportunity, long-term planning,
More
those types of
collaborative.
things. Pardon?
It's more collaborative.
Right, and again, transparency is key in these deals. I mean, nobody wants to be like, okay, we're gonna duck and cover, that doesn't work. We've seen that before throughout the years where people aren't transparent, and I don't know about you, but that kind of ticks me off. So, I prefer to be, right up, straight up, but again, we're using these tools in the toolbox. It's legal, there's no, what's the word? It's basically written in the statute that the Land Bank Tract Authority, if it's owned or operated by one, it can be then qualified as a blighted property, and then it does expand the opportunities to include, these core community eligible costs that include the public infrastructure and site prep. Yeah.
So how does it get into the land bank?
So the land bank will acquire the property.
Yeah, but isn't there reasons why the land bank takes over properties?
So in certain circumstances, land banks will acquire property through a tax foreclosure process, right? In other circumstances, the land banks will partner with another, like a nonprofit, if they need to offset some of the development cost. Or in certain cases like this, they'll do a temporary transfer to qualify the property for the eligibility in order to just set the base for the approval of brownfield plans to expand those.
So is that set in the statute then?
Yeah, it's followed by that, and then everything has to be followed either by, there's both the land bank and the Act 381 through the Brownfield Financing Act, yeah. And this gets, this will get lawyered up and make sure that everything's done on the up and up, so.
Are
But-
these agreements, you're going to have, I imagine, in the fully baked agreement, does the design of that development have to be finalized before this agreement is finalized, or just the public infrastructure pieces?
Are you talking about the site plan?
Yeah, the site plan.
So the site plan has been approved, is that accurate? Yeah.
The the site plan's been approved. It's really interesting because, just kind of having the type of personality like Claire has, the type that I have, we like a nice neat box with a bow on it and it's all wrapped up. And so, yeah, exactly, Mindy. That's not a brownfield. So when
You can't have the cart, because you don't have the horse yet or the wheels.
and that was really, we struggled with getting comfortable with that, but as Ann mentioned, this has been some time of just conversations and saying, is there interest? Would it even work if there was interest? Who the partners are, all of that. And I think one thing that helped me, because when I know that they went to the land bank, I was like, whoa, are we there yet? Is that, but what helped me understand is the progress and the length of time that the Boardman Trail took. When that brownfield was developed, it didn't even anticipate everything that was done. I mean, like you said, it was amended, it was written and then it was amended. So when we're talking about, does it help make a better beta stop at this property or near it? Does it help make the crosswalks, overground, underground, pedestrian, all of those things? We don't really know yet. And that's kind of, I know for me, that's really hard because I want to list like, okay, here's what the taxes will say, and here's what it'll be. But it kind of evolves. And I think that there will be some visioning through that too as well, correct? Claire, is like what will work and so forth. And we have to engage with the DNR, who's already working and well down their master plan for that park.
Yeah, to your point, we have started some preliminary visioning discussions with DNR, as well as we had a meeting with TART and the Land Conservancy and BEDAS, and so we've kind of had some of these preliminary visioning conversations just to come up with a very preliminary list of projects that will, I think, continue to get refined and through more engagement and input from other.
Question. So I own this piece of property and I can go in joint with the land bank, or the land bank will buy it from me. And then, so my name may be jointly on it, but there's somebody else on it, and then it goes to Brownfield. Your name goes on the deed.
No, Brownfield never goes on the deed.
No.
So you don't legally have any hold up? Okay, well, I was gonna ask, what about all this uncapping that keeps going?
No, the authority, Brownfield Redevelopment Authority doesn't get involved in any property acquisition or, we just help facilitate the process to getting a Brownfield plan adopted. So our role is really looking at a base plan for, future, projects, existing projects, and then reviewing those with the state agencies and working through their support.
So then I was just going to say, the purchase that you're talking about, that's really done through the contracts with the current property owner and then the attorney for the county, and they negotiate all of the terms of that, and that's where we're talking about. I believe that they were taking into account the current assessment and so forth.
Oh,
But those are all the terms they negotiate.
One other question, and I hate to even ask it, but curiosity.
I know.
Okay, the land bank puts money into this for infrastructure.
No. Well,
Or the
actually,
brownfield, I'm sorry. What happens, or has it ever happened where the project fell through once the money was invested in it? And how did Brownfield or whoever recapture their money?
Okay, so it's a little bit of a reverse of what you said. So the Brownfield tax increment financing
Right.
works as a reimbursement for costs that are spent by East Bay Township or the private developer or TART, or MDNR, or
Whoever.
MDOT, whoever basically does those infrastructure improvements, signs an agreement with the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority that's called a Development and Reimbursement Agreement. That Development and Reimbursement Agreement is a legal document that binds me to you, DNR, to reimburse you for that pedestrian bridge that you want to put over US 31 to make everybody happy. And, and, essentially, that's how it works. So it's a pay-as-you-go. The Brownfield Authority, all we do is bank the tax revenue.
If there isn't
If
any,
there-
you can't get it back.
Right, and if there's no tax revenue, then we don't get any, you don't get reimbursed. So say if this project fell through, say the Hyatt House doesn't happen, then, we would essentially, if nothing happened in the next, usually we put in our development and reimbursement agreements 18 months to 2 years. If nothing has gotten developed, we have the ability to terminate that plan. And then all taxes would go back to the taxing jurisdictions. So there's a lot of provisions in place.
Okay.
Pardon?
Who's out the money? You are.
No, it goes back to the taxing jurisdictions.
No, you've put in infrastructure changes, and those all cost something, so.
Well, the infrastructure wouldn't be done until the development gets built, because we want to make sure that there's enough tax revenue for future infrastructure improvements.
Yeah, they're not gonna build a bridge until the hotel's.
Right.
Well, the bridge, but what if there's something under the hotel you have to fix?
Oh, the hotel, well, then that's their game, that's their risk. That's the game, right? The development game. I mean, you take the risk to develop a property, and if you put in your infrastructure and you don't move forward with the development, then you're
Basically, they're
out.
fronting the money.
They're fronting the money, yeah. All the money is fronted by private and other public means. The Brownfield Authority, the Land Bank, nobody fronts that money.
Oh,
Right.
Yeah.
But then your reimbursements come later.
They come much later, so it's a reimbursement per year.
Okay.
So if it's a, $5 million project, and I'm capturing $500,000 per year, do the math. It takes, over a period of time.
Well, I was just curious because how did something like this become initiated? Is it the developer finds this out? Do they start the process and then find this out? I mean, what's,
Well, Mindy'd be able to tell you, only from the experience here, I can tell you that when we've had a developer bring it to us in this case, but also sometimes developers aren't aware of it and they become aware of another project. And
no,
so,
it's clear for me how it works in Traverse City.
yeah.
It was not clear how it would work up here.
Well, like last Thursday, Dan mentioned that, if you have a piece of property, if East Bay has a piece of property, say on the Strip, and we have a vision of what we want to put there or want to get there, we should direct people to them or tell them what we'd like to see. And they find developers. They would help find developers.
They being,
MEDC.
Yeah, MEDC.
It's a,
So it could be us putting together a packet to identify the open areas and what kind of things we'd like to see in it, and then they could be disseminated to different developers and inviting them to take a look at it.
Development opportunities.
Mindy?
Brownfield plans are living documents, so you gotta remember that what happens is, if you talk about the Hyatt House, there are gonna be some costs that they're gonna have that are environmental, that's the phase one. Phase two, they're probably not gonna have a BEA if they don't find anything in the phase two. Those are the environmental costs. You're also gonna see, they could potentially get some other thing, but the great part about this particular part is we're going in when the base level is low. So all the money that Hyatt House spends to develop this is that capturable value. and then you take that money and then you say, okay, we want to do X, that can be in your brownfield plan today, right? Hyatt House is getting built, they're starting to pull in taxable revenue that we can capture. And then a couple years down the road, somebody says, hey, we gotta fix the sewer system out front because X, Y, and Z happened, but we got a brownfield plan, and we can go and capture that, so you got public benefit. What do you have to do? You have to change that brownfield plan to include that eligible activity, and then you can capture that, but the bonus right now is you do it now, before that thing has been built, so you have that huge amount of money. But have any brownfield plans never been amended? I think all of them have.
I'm trying to think, yeah, there's most of our.
The master list at the beginning is not the end.
Well, and the other thing is they make you have this wonderfully huge tax table that means absolutely nothing because you're guessing what the taxes are going to be for the next 30 years.
Yeah, right. So based on that tax projection, back of the napkin, right, I like to call it, basically based on this development, we're estimating about $500,000 coming in a year. And that's just back of the napkin comps based on other hotels in the area for new product, right? It may be higher, it may be lower, but, it's a nice revenue projection right now that we can say, this going out 30 years, what can this do for the community in terms of community benefits and infrastructure? So this will allow for reimbursement, of eligible infrastructure projects that we've included, that we talked about earlier today, including, the improvements that Claire mentioned, Hart Trail connectivity, did I spell that wrong? Via the improved pedestrian bridge, which is all on our wish list, because that would be really great. Yeah, and allow for increased recreational opportunities for residents. I'm not supposed to share this, so nobody talks about this map. But this is a little bit of a visioning, sort of what we were talking about, our early visioning, looking at, what could be. So the DNR currently owns and operates that piece in red, right? That's their current parcel that they have all of the campsites on. They are expanding to the back. I think they're going to be putting in more
Low impact?
low impact type
Camping,
of
isn't that right?
camping, right, like tent camping versus, the big trailer
I think
camping.
that's their plan, yeah. I don't think it's been finalized yet.
Right.
So they did get some support from ARPA funds that came through.
6 million.
Yeah, so they're putting in improvements to their park, and part of the discussion was, and part of the appeal to work with the developer is that, you see where that, I can point, I don't know how to point it, but where the yellow line goes like that, and there's the little circle, the one right there where it's blue, that's currently where all the traffic goes out of that park. It's right next door to the new hotel development. That was problematic for the developers because they are also going to have traffic flow. There's no lights right there at all, and there's an old pedestrian bridge that is not ADA compliant, and nobody owns up to who owns it. There was back and forth debate on many occasions. It's the DNR's problem. It's MDOT's problem. It's the DNR's problem. It's MDOT's problem. We don't really know who owns that bridge, but it's not in good shape. So ideally, it's so silly, right? So ideally, the, benefit would be to really redo that bridge, whether it's, a traditional, more ADA compliant bridge where folks can, take their strollers across with their kids versus like schlepping them up, we've never done that, over the bridge and down, and then, making it more accessible for everybody. That was the catalyst for this whole discussion, that pedestrian crossing right
Yes, it
there,
was.
over, the top. How can we, fundraise, even if we did municipal bonds or we did a combination of DNR trust fund money and TART funds and TAP, grants like we did for the Boardman. If you saw the spreadsheet on all of the funding that came into that Boardman Lake Loop, in addition to Brownfield, it was, yeah, it's crazy. So it takes a village, you know? I always like to say that. Takes a village to have these kind of cool projects come together. And I think this is just a terrific opportunity to, you know, make that happen.
The DNR's plan through their master planning process is to keep the current bridge, put a light there, and also do an at-grade crossing. And so they've really been thinking about that a long time. And of course, they have to get that through MDOT, obviously. And it's questionable if that will work because of the distance. But we're really, part of a lot of our conversations have really been just getting everyone we're collaborating with, especially the DNR, to open their minds to what could be there, particularly with having good, safe ADA crossing. So one of the things that Claire and I recently did just this past week was talked with Brian Souza, who has some structural engineers that might be able to, they're taking a look at a couple things and putting a proposal together that maybe we can broach some of the partners with, engaging them to do some visioning of what that looks like. Because lots of times, right, when you bring them a vision, it becomes a lot more real than talking about it. And we need to know what's possible, because we all keep saying, well, is a switchback possible? No, there's not enough room. Yes, there is enough room.
Well, what's interesting, I just saw this morning. I was meeting with Traverse City's Downtown Development Authority, and they have that new vision plan for the Boardman, Lower Boardman, they call it, improvements. Part of that vision is doing a pedestrian bridge across. And it's not crazy. It's not, you know, it doesn't look like, you know, what you would think would be, you know, it's very attractive. So we could also maybe pick on Jean for some information on cost.
Yeah, yeah. That's
But, you know, it's, I don't know about you, but have you guys tried to, like, cross? It's kind of scary. You know, along US 31, okay.
Well, and currently it's still restricted. You have to be part of a resident or whatever staying at the campsite or a paid person at the water side to be able to use that either way.
Right, yeah. So that was also part of the discussions, because the DNR, by the way, I don't think that's, when we were talking to them, and you see this, the yellow sort of line that's drawn through here, the idea was to have the pedestrian traffic flow through there versus coming through the park, because everybody should be able to access it. Yeah, there shouldn't be any restrictions on that. It's public land. They told us it's public land, so they cannot, other than vehicular traffic, they can restrict vehicles, well, it's like, they can restrict vehicles, but they cannot restrict pedestrian traffic.
Seems if it is restricted, that the DNR owns it.
Right. But even if the DNR owns it, it shouldn't be restricted.
You're talking about the overpass?
Yeah.
It isn't restricted.
Right.
You can pick it up.
I didn't think
I've
so.
used it many a times,
Okay.
and nobody's ever
That's what
questioned
I
it.
was thinking.
Because you pick it up right on the public sidewalk
Yeah.
on the south side.
Yeah.
It just empties into the waterfront park, and you don't need, as an individual, you can walk through that
But I will-
waterfront park.
I will say you have to be an able-bodied individual, and that's what really gets me. Because,
Right.
you know, I've sat and watched at that corner how many times when, you know, a group's gone through, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand a little bit of the math here. So help me understand this bridge, for example. Let's just pick this out as the component here.
Yeah.
So let's just say, for easy math, this is $1 million bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody determines that it's going to cost $1 million.
Uh-huh.
So you need to.
You wish, no.
Well, I know. You need, so to pay for that over time, you need to capture $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Under this plan, who pays for the bridge construction? Is it a combination of the private developer, DNR, East Bay Township, whoever's going to pitch in, or is this all on the developer and then they get reimbursed for that expense?
Haven't
It's,
figured that out yet.
right.
Okay. So that's all, that's part of the creativity of,
Part of the
Part of the
plan.
creativity. Think of this brownfield plan as a planning tool,
A stepping stone.
a stepping stone.
and I guess where I'm kind of going with that though, for me is, I feel, you know, more comfortable, not that I'm the decision maker here, but I feel more comfortable as a taxpayer if, you know, the private developer has a significant amount of skin in the game relative to each of those.
Yeah.
Because, as we've all seen, projects like this have overruns and, you know, they cost more money, so I don't think that the public entity should be fully exposed to those costs.
Well, they're not. So anything that the private developer is doing, that's all paid for by that private developer.
So all the reimbursement activity that happens as part of this only reimburses public entities.
No, no.
Okay.
It's going to be a public-private partnership. So
Okay.
a portion will go to the eligible activities that the private entity incurs. A portion will go to X, Y, and Z public entities who incur those costs. So a lot of times, like in municipal situations, like there'll be municipal bonds taken out for infrastructure improvements. And under the Brownfield Financing Act, we can also leverage interest. You can also pay for reimbursement of interest on those bonds. So, for example, like the Boardman Lake Loop, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority contributed to reimbursement of certain eligible activities within that trail system, but then there was TART, TART participated. But then there was like everybody and their brother chipped in. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create a base plan that as we start figuring out how to layer those monies, because it's not going to come up, you know, somebody's not going to walk up and say, here's 10 million, build a bridge, right? We're going to have to look at creative solutions to basically come up with that revenue to be able to, you know, some of it may be grants, TAP grants come in, and then there's a portion that has to be a local contribution. We can use the tax revenue off of the Brownfield plan as local contribution for state-funded projects.
Who would
So,
stand behind the bonds?
To be municipal bonds.
It's a municipal bond.
So it'd be issued by East Bay.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying this, I'm not saying we're going to bond. I'm just saying there's an opportunity.
You're coming into my world now, so.
I'm just saying in other examples and other
Well, I mean,
communities.
it's a very directed use of the tax revenues, because typically what happens is, right, they pay their taxes, it goes into a huge pool, and we take out projects, right? Well, we're directing this very specific project, and we're funneling those taxes straight to that. So it's just that's how I think of it, a very directed use of tax funds.
You mentioned that the drive was a problem for the developer. Are we saying if nothing happens here, if this kind of falls on deaf ears and never gets any momentum as far as the Brownfield plan, this project, the hotel project is dead because of that? Is it that problematic?
No, it's not that problem.
Okay.
Because I think the DNR has provisions to move that drive anyway. It would just make their traffic flow and safety for, you know, everybody, put them in a better position. So, you know, the developers could walk away and say, we don't want our project in a brownfield plan. You know, and then we're all like, okay, well, that's fine too, right? But, you know, they're willing to participate in this because, you know, they look at it as, it is a benefit to them, of course, because, you know, they're going to have a better connectivity to the waterfront for their, for their rentals.
Mindy?
How long is the developer willing to wait for this to get put together?
It's a good question. Oh, are you talking about the plan itself? So the idea was to, well, at least the last update, was to have a brownfield plan come in March to the Board of Trustees. But that's all predicated on their current financing, to see where we're trying to, you know, financing is tough right now with the interest rates. So
Does this plan stand as collateral to the lending institution? They don't look at it as,
Not in this case,
okay.
no. There's not enough skin in the game for that, yeah, to make that, you know.
When does typically the reimbursement begin after?
So the reimbursement only happens once the project's developed and the new assessment comes in.
Okay.
And so it's usually a lag. So say they built, you know, it gets built by '24, they start paying taxes in '25, then reimbursements come in '26.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Are you, got any more in your,
I'm good. Those are my links if you want to check it out. We have actually a pretty cool website at the county where we have all of our projects up that you can go check out. And I'll make sure to PDF this and circulate it to Claire and Beth. And I know you, I'm Mindy. And so,
Thanks for being with us this evening.
yeah, you're welcome. I enjoyed
Thank you.
it.
That
I
was-
hope I was helpful because I know it's a lot, you know.
It's a lot of
A
information.
lot of information.
One last question. Is TIF, I get these things mixed up. Is TIF the same as a pilot program or a little bit different?
No, don't say that word. Pilot, dirty word. No, I'm kidding. No, a pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes. So, and that's usually done with low-income housing tax credit projects. And that's an agreement that the local unit of government will come up with that private developer. And I don't like pilots right now because everybody and their brother's all excited about pilots, and then that means that I can't do my brownfield work because we can't capture pilots. Yeah, so it's hands off, yeah,
great.
but, so it's different.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, you guys have a great night.
Very good discussion.
Thank you.
I have my thing.
I learned a lot.
Claire, that is a wonderful screensaver.
So cute.
Okay. Again, thank you very much. That was very interesting.
Thank you, bye.
Good night. Okay, back to the master plan, and that will be back to Claire.
Okay. So, since we just updated the master plan, I think it's a great opportunity to take a look at the action plan. And you'll see in your packets, I went ahead and pulled the action plan. And what I really wanted to focus on today was the table, the series of tables with each one of the categories. And so I'd like to get in the habit of, and Tracy, I'll just give this to you. I'd like to get into the habit of, you can just, of reviewing the action plan every year. And then, so each year I would present at the joint meeting kind of a status update of the action plan, what's been accomplished, what, in process, complete. And so then we really have this as a working document where we're reviewing it regularly, identifying our top priorities for the year and just, trying to implement it, because I feel like too often you look at a master plan, you're like, oh, those were a bunch of great ideas that we, should have done and planned to do. And I know there's a lot of reasons why things don't get implemented, but, so I went ahead and took a look at the action plan. You'll see that there's 10 actions in there that involve zoning amendments. So luckily, these are in process, and we anticipate that by the end of the year, the majority of these will be addressed through the zoning ordinance rewrite. I found that there were 7 items that are identified both as priority level 1 and as well as should be accomplished within a year. So I thought those were kind of low-hanging fruit to take a look at. A number of these will be accomplished through the zoning ordinance rewrite. There's a few that do not involve the zoning process. And one of those is working with MDOT on those US 31 mid-block crossings. And so, we can discuss kind of next steps on those, as well as there's 2 actions you'll notice that involve civic engagement and communications. And so, I was thinking there could be an opportunity to provide some input and direction on those, what specifically those communications look like, and some proactive engagement with recruitment for boards. There's two other general law ordinances that are top priority. One is the short-term rental amendments, which we're, in process of working on and hopefully will be done by the end of this year. And then the septic ordinance is another one that just keeps coming up. And so, that's another thing that, based on board direction and planning commission direction, we could take a stab at this year or wait until after the zoning ordinance rewrite. Some of the other top priorities include the capital improvement program, which we're going to be discussing after this agenda item, and I think that we're slated to make some progress on that this year. Beach district placemaking, that's one that I think our fellow is going to provide some substantial capacity on, as well as we have applied for a grant that we'll be hearing back from in October to do some of that engagement and envisioning. And then the other one was implementing the non-motorized plan, which is high priority but long-term, and that's another one that we can discuss. But I just thought it would be good to just get feedback from both Planning Commission and Board on what you see as some of the items that you want to check off this year, or at least make some substantial progress on.
Well, not with respect to specific items, but I want to say I do really like the format of the table, the priority, the timeline, and so forth. And I like the idea of us revisiting it every year at a joint meeting. I think that that's really useful. And a joint meeting, when we do it about this time of the year, it comes right after your annual report has just been submitted to the Township Board. So I think that's really timely.
Okay. Any other questions about this? Okay.
I would just say, it looks like a really ambitious year. Year one is huge. Got some big things that have to be specific, but-
Yeah, so, we do have, a number of things that are within year one, so if there's any direction on kind of what to attack first, that would be, helpful guidance for staff too.
Well, I think I do generally agree with the ones that seem like they're rated as priority one.
But did you say that some of these that are related to zoning ordinances are kind of all-inclusive of the activity that's currently ongoing?
Yeah, everything related to zoning, I anticipate will be taken care of with the zoning ordinance amendment. So that's 10 of them that we can check off for hopefully
There you
next
go.
year.
But the septic ordinance is not zoning, that would be,
Right, and so I am looking for some direction on if we want to tackle that this year, if we want to get the zoning ordinance and short-term rental complete, and then tackle it, if we kind of, how many different balls in the air do we want to have at once?
Well, one thing I know is, I've been around at least long enough to know that septic tank and septic tank inspections bring out a lot of opinions, right, Glenn?
You betcha.
But I do think, and I've always thought it is important. When we have failing systems, it's very difficult. And there are a lot of people who, and I would say I was one of them, I didn't live in a super critical area, but I lived over in English Woods. And when we moved here, I had never been on a septic tank before. And luckily, we didn't end up having any problems with ours, but it was a couple years till I realized, gotta learn how to maintain that system. And I do think with the number of people we have moving into the area, and we have a lot of people who are not on municipal sewer, it's important. I don't know what this will end up looking like. Will it end up looking like an ordinance? Maybe. Will it end up looking like a point of sale inspection? Maybe. Will it end up looking like a education campaign? Maybe. I'm not sure. But, I do know when we went through the septage stuff back when you were here at the township and I was at the county, and we tried to do a $35 assessment where you could unload all of your septage for $35 a year. There was more people upset with that than you could shake a stick at. So it'll be interesting.
Well, when we were working on the short-term rental ordinance, at one point, we had a septic inspection as part of the ordinance, one of the 50,000 drafts we did. And Butch came in here and said, basically, you can't do that because the fact that, and I can't remember all of what he said, but it
Which,
had,
right?
yeah. That there is no certification for people to do that. And because of that, it just was this whole mess that you were talking about, but I think that might have changed.
We could not get, and even before that meeting, we could not get an agreement on what that would look like. And it was interesting to me because then as recently as last year, I sat with a representative and I said, what are your priorities? And I said, I'm surprised that Michigan doesn't have a state law regarding this. I mean, we're surrounded by water. And I believe all the other states that are around the Great Lakes area do have them. I could be wrong on that, but Wisconsin and so forth. And he said, I'm absolutely open to listening to that. He said, if you can figure out what that means. And it was kind of resonating with the same thing that we had found before administratively, which is nobody could agree on anything. That's not to say that we shouldn't go down that path and figure it out for us or for our community, but it's not as easy as it seems, I guess.
I kind of had that same thing. My daughter's going through foster care licensing, and they had to have their septic system inspected. And I'm like, okay, I want to be there when they come, because I want to know what they do for that. And she didn't let me know. So, but they got a clean inspection, and as far as I know, they didn't even open the septic tank, the clean out, because it was under their porch, so I know they didn't do it, but.
Kind of hard to do an inspection if you don't look at the tank.
Yeah.
Talk to Butch.
Well, and I just, but they
It's a
got,
pretty important part of it.
but they got a clearance from the health department or wherever.
Might be a flush test or
And
something.
so, there's got to be something
Which is not.
at our health department that covers that at some point. But I don't know.
The thing is, and we've been through this, been through it at MTA because they're trying to get on the table with it. Number one, they come and open up a septic tank. They can't see inside there because the liquid is up just about to the top. That's where it flows out. So if you open the top or the ground isn't saturated where you're standing, you got to assume it's working. And the problem is you get people that, they come out with a certification to go out and be septic tank inspectors. The sky's the limit. It's like when they went through with the septic plant and it doubled the price of what it cost you to get your tank pumped. If the county would, if they want to pass something and have the county come out and look at it, the county people do it, not a private individual, maybe I'd think a little different of it, but I even talked, all this stuff seemed to start over in the east side of the state where they had all the septic tanks by Alpena. Well, all them septic tanks didn't quit at the same time. Nobody dealt with it. And all they would have had to do is cap the outlet on the septic tank and use it for a holding tank until they figured something out. I mean, if you look at it from a realistic point of view, and I talked to our state representative, he said, well, the tank might leak. I said, okay, where's it gonna go if it leaks? Well, it'll soak in the soil. I said, what do you think your drain field does? I mean, the same thing. It just, I guess I'd hate to see local government start getting into this stuff. I really would.
That's why I say, I think that we need to look at it, but I think there's a broad range of spectrum, maybe that we end up looking at, like I said, all the way from, maybe there is an ordinance, maybe we come across something where it's like, oh, wish I had a V8, right? To maybe it is really just a concentrated educational effort, which sounds way too innocuous. Even saying it, I think it sounds innocuous. But they can be very effective if done correctly.
One other thing I want to bring up is when septic tanks or holding tanks are pumped, the rule of thumb for a holding tank is about 6 to 8 weeks if people live there full-time. The county gets a record of everything that's pumped. So when you get a holding tank that's getting pumped once a year and somebody lives there, there's a problem. The other thing is that with septic tanks, you're better off if they don't come out and say you got to pump them every 3 years, because then you got to build the bacteria back up to make the tank work. I had a new field put in 4 years ago, and my tank hadn't been pumped in, I don't know, 25, 30 years. And the guy come out and pumped it, said, your tank looks good. It's the tree roots that got to mine. But, so this thing of pumping them every 3 years is, that's just money for the pumper to do.
That's why years ago I liked that proposed solution, because it allowed people at a very low rate to choose when they do it, but yet it gave them the incentive to get it done, but anyway.
Anyhow, I'll be quiet about that now.
Well, actually, on a report I'm reading, Michigan is the only state in the nation without a uniform standard for on-site septic systems are situated, designed, built, installed, and maintained. We're the only one in the nation that doesn't have something.
And the other thing I'll just mention, just doing a little bit of research on ordinances, there's, a pretty vast variety of what's been adopted. In Michigan, some require the county health department to come and do the inspection. Some allow an outside contractor to come and verify the system. Some have mandatory pumping, some have mandatory inspection, with potential for pumping, some have just mandatory pumping. And so I think there is a lot of kind of research and best practices that we could bring back to the boards just to take a look at what other communities are doing. I think it sounds like the ideal is having it at the county level, because then it's uniformly implemented, countywide by a health department, as opposed to kind of piecemeal at the township level. But I think a lot of townships, villages are going down the path of adopting those ordinances because it's not being done at the county level.
Well, and specifically, we have more inland lakes than any other township in Grand Traverse County, so.
And the topography doesn't really lend itself well in the lakes area.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's down.
So with regards to that, what I would say is that we just need to keep a pulse on the situation too, is what's going on and changes, and, if another community close to us has something that we can steal or communicate with Butch, that's what he does, and just say, hey, what's going on, and
I can tell you that with Leelanau County's new implementation of a point of sale, Butch and I did talk about that, and it's going to negatively impact so many people out there, because so many people out there are on holding tanks, so many people have, the older farms have well pits, and they literally probably took it too far to one direction, and I think that's where it gets a little bit sticky. It's gonna cost people a lot of money, because if they sell their house and if their well is in a well pit, they will be forced to put in a new well. And so it's a tricky and controversial subject, and I'm all for some kind of regulation on it, because I think we should be monitoring those somehow. But man, it's tricky, because to take it too far, and like Butch said, they just went way too far to the other spectrum.
Well, and point of sale has always been, I get the idea that, well, at least you get some, but also with point of sale, it's very, very dependent on whether, well, obviously, whether the property sells, but you could have one that is really a bad tank that's been in a family for generations that hasn't sold. And that's maybe a culprit, and it does nothing for that.
Yeah, it's only when it sells. So it's, yeah, like I said, it's not, and just like you just said, I mean, Butch has a cheat card for that. He's got the cheat card that says, this township requires this and this and this, and this township, or this, I mean, he's got it all spelled out. Why? Because it's not consistent anywhere, and you absolutely cannot keep track. And now Leelanau County's throwing this at us, it's like, oh, and they are requiring the health department to do it. So it's just.
It's a stinky situation.
It's a stinky situation.
But the conversation needs to begin.
Yeah, there's other communities, and not that I know of in Michigan, but that require, like, all residents on septic to have inspections every, frequency. So I don't know what that looks like from a administrative standpoint, but that's something else to look at. And I don't know of any communities in Michigan. The only ordinances that I've seen in Michigan are somehow tied to point of sale.
Probably because they couldn't figure out how else to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of an easy answer, but it doesn't solve the problem.
It's going to be an interesting year.
Well, and I do like that you have a range on here too, because we do have our plates full.
Yeah, I kind of wish some of it was larger range, more years to complete.
Well, and it's a living document, so.
My question is, how many have you been done since we started the ministry?
Nothing.
Nothing.
But 10 will be done this year.
Well, I think we took those ones off this action plan, so.
That was Paul's doing.
They weren't looking. Okay, any other comments on master plan? Okay, last item, the capital improvement program, and we'll go back to, this one is both Beth and Claire.
So with the capital improvement plan, obviously what we've been doing through the redevelopment ready community program is updating the master plan, which is not only part of that process, but it's also required by statute intermittently. And then from that, we're obviously have a grant and we're redoing the zoning ordinance, which supports the master plan. And then part of that RRC process will be the capital improvement plan. And I did bring this to East Bay's board probably November or December to you guys, I can't recall exactly, in looking to have a consultant help us with this and walk us through it, just to have that added capacity through planning and zoning and administration. And while we are going out for an RFQ, that hasn't gone out yet. That should go out in this first quarter, and then bring that back, I don't know, probably 2 to 4 weeks after that goes out. So this document is just a really nice capital improvement plan guide from redevelopment ready communities that we wanted to share with you, that kind of puts it in a bit of a format for you, and basically what you can expect as we move forward with that, with whichever consultant is successful in the RFQ process. And so just wanted to let you know, particularly the planning commissioners, because you weren't part of that conversation with the township board, that we would be undergoing this process.
Something I guess I would like to throw out there just for thought, that I know, and this started back, I don't know when, years ago, but that the planning commission's in charge of the capital improvement plan. But the problem that I see with that, and I don't have a problem with them doing it because they know what developments are coming in. But the problem you got, there's other things that they're not in tune to what capacities are, that I would like to think that if planning commission has got the capital improvement plan, when they discuss it, that our engineer would be at the table.
And actually, that's a topic that we've talked about at the Michigan Government Finance Officers Association, just at the last
I was
fall.
outside listening.
At the fall seminar, that came up about the capital improvements and how by statute, really that is run through the Planning Commission. And, but there's a recognition with people who implement capital improvement plans, that there has to be an administrative component to that too. So, right, a roof on a building, or in particular, water and sewer. And right now, Brian is looking at some of that based on that rate analysis that we've kind of re-kicked that into gear. So he'll have some good information to bring to that. But yes, there is a recognition that you kind of have to, tie all that information, say administratively, that we get through water and sewer as well, and couple that with the information with the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would seem, just looking at this thing, that there's a lot of coordination among all the different groups, the Parks Department, the fire, it just seems there's a lot of people that have to get involved in this.
Yeah, and we're sitting at a really good time to do this because of ARPA, whether we like it or not, has really made us take a look at some of the projects and some of the departments, and we've gotten a lot of those grants ready. So in doing so, we have some of the narrative and information for some of those projects. So they'll feed into this as well. And that's one of the reasons. This wasn't just because of the RRC, but it was also because the 1.2 million that we have in ARPA funds, we're doing that as revenue loss. And so it frees some of the ties that bind that funding, and essentially goes to fund balance. So we really need to take a look at that fund balance and utilize that and plan for it with the capital improvement plan.
Super.
Yeah. I will let you know when the RFQ goes out and when to expect it back.
Great, thank you. Any other comments?
Sooner the better.
Yes?
I just say the sooner the better. We've
Okay.
got some serious needs in the township that needs to be addressed, and
Right.
we need to get to it.
Okay, so that brings us back to public comment, which will open at 8:37. Come up? No?
Sally, you're always welcome.
Okay, then we'll close it at 8:37. All right, updates from the planning commissioners? Seeing none. The meeting dates coming up, February 13th will be the regular Board of Trustees. The March 7th will be for the regular planning commissioners. We understand we have a couple of items coming on that. And then the zoning ordinance subcommittee will be on February 15th and March 1st. And of course, the public workshop on February 21st at 6 p.m. in the Township Hall. So anybody who out there who would like to join that meeting, please come. And with that, we're adjourned.